told two nurses to help me. The two nurses helped by pushing on my stomach. Once they pushed on my stomach, apparently Sarah was disconnected or stressed in some way or put into distress. So, and then her heart rate started falling. Once her heart rate started falling, then everybody panicked.
Because Kamni Singh was an older mother, and because the baby she was carrying was unusually large, her doctor told her she should have a cesarean section delivery. But when Kamni arrived at the hospital in labor, the gynecologist on duty insisted she try for a normal delivery. The labor was long and difficult, and Kamni developed a high fever and an infection. By the time the doctor decided to try for a cesarean, it was too late.
But there was no time because her heart rate started falling dramatically, and so was mine. And then they decided they had to deliver her the fastest way possible. So in order to do that, he had two nurses press on my stomach, two other people holding my legs apart, somebody on my head bending me forward, and together they compacted me for about 10 minutes until they tried to force her out. Even at that point in time, she didn't come right out, so then they used forceps and they got her out. But I saw three of them took the baby and ran. Once they left the room, I knew that things were not well. Nobody told me, even is she a boy or a girl, nobody told me anything, nobody, and everybody kind of just stood there looking at me. I felt maybe she must have died even, you know, just seeing three people run with her.
The baby didn't die, but her brain began to swell, and she suffered a seizure, and then another and another. She was transferred to Sick Children's Hospital. Kamni, too, remained in hospital to recover from the complications of the delivery.
The truth of the matter is, too, when Dr. Mehta told us cerebral palsy, we really had no idea what exactly was he saying. Although he tell you in straightforward terms, you didn't know anything more about it.
Cerebral palsy, or CP as it's commonly known, is caused by damage to the brain, either during pregnancy, at birth, or during the first 3 years of a child's life. Depending on what part of the brain is injured and how severely, the types of CP vary widely from one person to the next. It can affect speech, muscle coordination, and the ability to learn.
Anyways, let's see what we've got here.
It can be mild or severe. Each person is affected differently. With Kamni's baby, Sarah, all that's known at this stage is that the right side of her body is affected, her arm more than her leg.
We kind of just took it all that he said, and we left the office and we came home. I came home, I cried all night. I cried the next day. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to deal with it. And then on the third day, I decided I just have to do all that I have to do, because crying wouldn't really help the situation.
The news can be devastating. Your child has CP. What does it mean? Will they walk, talk, go to school? Can they have a normal life? Parents are in turmoil at this stage. But even worse than knowing your child has CP is not knowing what the problem is. It took a long time for Linda Mann and Wayne Cole to find out.
The weekend that we brought her home from the hospital, she was 5 weeks old, and she basically cried 24 hours a day. And there was nothing we could do to comfort her. Feeding her didn't seem to help. And that continued on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so I knew right then and there was something wrong, and maybe she would outgrow it or change, and we just kept asking questions with every visit to the doctor.
There was always a constant disagreement between the two of us, because I went by the feeling that the medical community knows, and they would tell us if there was something wrong. So even though Linda had the gut feeling that something was wrong, I always argued, said, well, they didn't tell us there was anything wrong, so there can't be anything wrong. There's something wrong with the way that we're doing things.
Jocelyn's failure to thrive was made even more evident by the fact she had a twin sister, Julia, who was developing normally.
We just kept blaming ourselves for doing things wrong. And that's where we started to burn out, and our energy levels started to run down.
Linda and Wayne kept pressing for answers.
When we became more persistent and more sure that there was something wrong and more things that we wanted to find out, we found that the doctor spent less time analyzing our child and more time analyzing us.
Everyone wants an answer, and when there isn't one, it almost drives you crazy, trying to fabricate one.
Then one day, the truth came out of left field from a doctor they had never met before.
He looked at me and he said, "Hasn't anybody told you anything?" And I said, "No." And he said, basically, your daughter will be a vegetable all of her life. She will not speak or walk or talk. And I just went into shock and couldn't believe my ears, and he seemed to know what he was talking about, and I felt like the blood drained out of my body, and I just looked at her lying there on the little bench, and I just felt like walking away from her. And I just thought, well, everything I've done is not going to help, and why didn't they tell me this earlier? And I just thought, well, you look after them. If that's what you're telling me, there's nothing I can do to help her. And I got over that very, very quickly and picked her up, and we went home.
It was sort of like an opening of a door, but not really liking what I see behind it. But that door was open, and I had to walk through it.
What I tell parents, fellow parents, whenever I talk to them, is trust your own instincts. You know your child best.
Shirley's son Jason had a severe brain hemorrhage at birth, and no one was sure he would live. And because he couldn't swallow or keep any food down, he stayed in hospital until he was 3 months old.
The hospital, not realizing that he had cerebral palsy and not having that diagnosis, showed me how to feed him in a very, what I think is very cruel way, where he was just a wee little baby, and I used to have to wake him up and pinch his nose to make him scream and cry, and as soon as he cried, shoot through a syringe formula into his mouth, and that would trigger the swallow reflex, and that would make him swallow. And as soon as he did that, of course, half of it would come back up, and then he'd go back to sleep, the poor little lad, and I'd have to do it again. And this went on every 2 hours, 24 hours a day for about 3 months.
Each clinic Shirley took him to said he had a behavioral problem. But this didn't make any sense to her. It wasn't until Jason was a year old that a nurse at Sick Children's Hospital told Shirley that a swallow reflex problem is very often related to cerebral palsy, and that, in Jason's case, a simple drug could solve the problem.
I wish that doctors more often would say, perhaps. If I'd had a doctor turn around and say to me, and when my son was 2 or 3 months old, well, perhaps it's cerebral palsy, the first thing I would have done is find out what is cerebral palsy.
How are you doing now? Is she almost finished?
Well, need your book.
Parents need answers and information so they can begin to deal with the disability and make the necessary changes to their lives.
Oh, yeah, that's a good girl, yeah. Okay. Good girl, keep your head up. Now we'll do the story some more.
Linda Mann says it would have enabled them to concentrate their energies on finding out what was available for them in the community, rather than dwelling on what was wrong. They wouldn't have been so hard on themselves, nor so frustrated with Jocelyn.
It allows you to move on with your life.
And to put out less wasted effort into something that'll never be. Like trying to feed Jocelyn the normal way when Jocelyn can't feed the normal way. We spent a lot of time. I used to have to wake up 3 times in the middle of the night just to try to feed Jocelyn. And at some point in time, she would usually throw up. And each of these feeds would take over an hour. So a lot of wasted time that way.
He told us, we took it, we sit, we listened, and we came home.
Once you learn your child has CP, it's normal to feel very angry. It's one of the stages we all go through when facing a loss. It's a normal part of grieving. You may also feel hurt, disappointed, frustrated, and have fears about the future. It's important not to let those feelings stay bottled up inside because they can eventually cause you to become ill or depressed. Counseling at this time can be very helpful. Camney feels her family could benefit, but her husband doesn't want to discuss the problem. So when she needs to talk, she calls her family.
I feel that he stepped away. He didn't want to talk to his family about it because of the fact that they have come from a very perfect background, Like, it's okay if I want to talk to my friends and my family. That's my business, basically. But he didn't want me to talk to his family about it or his friends about it. And that was an extra stress and problem for me because in a few months we boiled down to deciding who was whose friend. Because as a family we have friends that are mutual friends now, and we can't differentiate, and it was making my life very difficult. You know, I feel terrible and I feel it was a lie when somebody keeps saying, oh, how is Sarah? I can't reasonably say she's okay. Right? And that put me under terrific pressure and terrific stress, that if I'm talking to his friends, oh, she's okay. And if I'm talking to my friend, oh, she's, you know, it's such a whale of a time we're having.
In addition to her full-time job running a daycare from her home, Camney says she feels responsible for the emotional well-being of the entire family, as well as being Sarah's full-time caregiver.
I put up a good front for them, too. I keep saying, oh, she'll be fine. It's not that bad. She'll be okay. Things will be better. Oh, she won't be sick forever. She'll be fine. When, deep down in my own self, I'm not so sure about that. I keep hoping and praying, yes, she'll be fine, but in reality, you don't know that.
Other children in the family can be deeply affected by the birth of a disabled child. Some children may try to act more dependent because they see the dependent sibling getting more attention. Or they may act up to get attention. Often, a sibling's feelings are not acknowledged because parents are too busy coping with the needs of the disabled child.
It's like my mom just sort of ignored me, kind of. And I was more of like a comforter to her instead of like a daughter. As me being the oldest, of course, I think she sort of expected me to comfort like the whole family and to like always be there for them. But I don't really know what she thought I would do.
My expectation and her, my demands on her have become certain in terms of once we knew Sarah was sick and Sarah needed all this attention and time. I certainly expected Samantha to grow up. I expect Samantha to do the dishes, you know, go to school, come back, no fun time, no play time, no giggle time, you know, just come home and do your homework and help me with Sarah. I get so burnt out at the end of the day that I'm really anxious for anybody to come through the door to take Sarah from me.
Samantha changed from a cheerful, outgoing 12-year-old surrounded by friends to a sad, withdrawn loner. At night she cried, unable to sleep. Her younger sister, Sabrina, took refuge in food.
But for Samantha and Sabrina, it has affected them tremendously. They kept saying, if it wasn't for Sarah, we would have gone on holiday. If it wasn't for Sarah, we would have done this. If it wasn't for Sarah, we would have done that. So now we have really talked that aspect over, and we have decided, no, Sarah will have to be a part of everything. Whatever we want to do, Sarah will have to be. Because the two of them, that's one thing on which they can become very resentful about. That they have lost their life basically because of Sarah.
Camney is doing the right thing by seeking support from her family, and her church too. It's important to get the problem out in the open, so that families can gradually come to terms with it, and look to the future, seek out professionals, and begin a planned program to help the child on its way. Camney is trying to make individual time for her other children as she used to, and her husband Dilip, although he still won't talk about it, helps by taking over much of the household chores, freeing Camney to spend time on Sarah's therapy.
I think we're sort of more close than before, even though if we don't really talk as much. But I sort of respect her more, I think, for all that she's been through. And I think she almost respects me a bit more to see that I can be strong if I wanted to be. And instead of like crying and everything, I'm a lot more stronger and I can handle things that I thought I couldn't.
Hurry, Dad, my arms are getting tired here.
Oh, hurry up, Jocelyn. Okay, Jocelyn, hurry up. Well, you're doing quite well, and Julie's helping.
Being disabled is not a stigma or a shame. It's a characteristic, like curly hair or wearing glasses. It's important for the parent to accept the child for what he or she is and not dwell on what might have been. Only then can the child learn to accept him or herself, and only then can the parents let go of the grief. It happens a little bit at a time, day by day. The overall goal is that the child can become an independent adult. However, the potential for independence may differ with each child.
What you end up doing is you end up having lower expectations, and you start planning your life with a different path than what you originally thought you were going to do. Now you have to readjust your whole thinking. All these wonderful things that you could do with normal children and healthy children, you can't do exactly the same way. You have to make special allowances. Less things you can do, different things you have to do.
For a child with CP, the early years are critical for learning the social skills that lead to independence, which will be crucial in the future. Play is the most useful learning experience of all. Play is a child's work. It's how they learn to interact with others. Play also develops physical strength and helps the child express emotions and release stress. The early years are also critical for the prevention of faulty movement patterns and possible deformity.
One of the other amazing things about our children is when they're born, their brain isn't fully developed. And so those early years, any type of effort at intervention, physical intervention of any kind, has a great potential of success.
Close body contact gives the child a sense of security, of love and acceptance. It's a comforting way for the child to learn. Camney is making a game of encouraging Sarah to learn to balance on all fours and to begin standing. Older children learn to use what they have in order to maximize their independence.
And you can even search for specific phrases.
They may not be able to use their limbs, but may still have a lively brain. Technology can open all kinds of doors, enabling children with disabilities to go on to lead fulfilling, independent lives. Young people need to branch out from their parents and make friends. This fosters self-esteem, and it's an important step on the road to independence. If they remain isolated, they will begin to fear new situations and new people. Not knowing how to get along with others can be a far greater disability in the future than any physical disability. Learning together in school is how children with varying abilities will learn to live and work together in the community as adults. It's important to get a full assessment of the child because integration might not work for every child. If you do choose integration, you need to work closely with the school because teachers already have their hands full.
You have to let them know what cerebral palsy is. You have to let them know particularly the details about how that cerebral palsy affects your child and how it might affect learning. And if you do that with the teacher, then the teacher will maybe look at your child as a child instead of a problem. There's that team that we need to build with doctors, but we also need to build it with teachers too.
It's not necessary to be super parent, Shirley says. Connect with other parents. Give yourself time to learn about CP. No one is born an expert on CP or knowing what to expect. Just when many of Jason's physical problems began to be solved, Shirley discovered he had learning difficulties and problems with visual and spatial perception.
Can you take that to the table for me, please, love? Jason, the table's right here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. You got it.
Let your child learn to do things for himself. Give them time to be just a kid because their lives are so filled with professional intervention as it is.
And that will help you keep your back straight. It'll help you with your posture.
I'm just like any other kid. I do have some limitations, but otherwise, I'm just like any other bozo on the bus.
And one of the doctors that we really liked gave us a really nice piece of information.
And that was not to pour all their energy into the disabled child, that the other children needed nurturing too.
And I put the brakes on, pouring every waking moment into Jocelyn, trying to teach her things.
They've learned to relax with Jocelyn, to do more fun things with her and the other children. They work at managing their time, at prioritizing, and at planning and budgeting for Jocelyn's future. But what's key is they're no longer controlled by the future.
You can't plan too far in the future. And if you do, you will make yourselves ill. So we've learned not to project down the road too far and not worry about the next government, this government. What will happen in the end will happen anyway. Things will change, technology will change, funding will change. We can't project ourselves that far into the future. We realize that we will have to be aware of her needs, and to always be seeking out what options are available to us. But we personally can't spend all of our time and energy worrying about how she's going to be housed when she's 20 years old. We're just worried about it now, and we try and take care of the present.